Reshare. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to financial management and board training combined. Uh, they're typically offered separately, but we're combining them to make it a little bit easier. Fortunately, that makes it a little bit longer as well, but I think it makes it easier to see how all the information relates to each other. It is a requirement for all treasurers at local units and at least one other member, a board member, preferably the president. But I highly recommend it for everybody because all board members are individually and collectively responsible for what happens with that PTA. So it's important to have that information and know what it is you're responsible for, what you're taking on, and how to make sure that things are going as they should. So I highly recommend that. As for the MCC PTA board members, that's our committee chairs, our cluster coordinators, area vice presidents. Um, they all need to have that training every year. I'm sorry, not every year. They need to have that at the beginning of their service, and then they don't have to take it again unless they have a gap in services. So if you're here for the MCC PTA board, that's fine. The executive officers of the MCC PTA, the elected officers, they also need the training, but their training has to come from either national or free state. So if you're here for your training in that capacity as an XCOM member, you're welcome to stay. Love for you to have the information. The training that you get from Free State is built off of my slides here. So you're going to get the information and it'll maybe make more sense when one or the other of us tells you or you hear it twice. So, but you're welcome to go if you want. All right. So this is why we're here. The mission and purpose of PTA is to make every child's potential a reality by engaging and empowering families and communities to advocate for all children. Notice all children and advocate. We are primarily an advocacy organization. That is our primary purpose. That is what is stated on our 501c3 certificates from the IRS. That's what we do. All the other things are to further that mission and enable us to do that and support our children and our schools. But we are an advocacy organization. I have to use. Okay. These are some of the things that we're going to talk about tonight. The duties of the treasurer and board members, what you're responsible for, what it means to be a 501c3, a lot of these things. And there are some slides at the end that we may or may not get to, usually not, that have additional information about insurance, filing a claim, some forms that we use in the course of our business. So when you get the slide deck, please take a look at those too, so that you have that information. And I've tried to link as much as I could within the slides and in the comments under the slides. So hopefully the slide deck, as well as the recording, which will be posted on our YouTube page, will be a constant resource for you that you can refer back to. Artie and I are also working on a list of FAQs to put on mccpta.org's website on a treasurer's page or a board members page so that you'll have access to that information. It's all very important, and you'll often see questions on the listserv cycle through routinely, especially as we get new board members and they don't know, they may not have access to the emails from the prior person. So you see those circle through. Hopefully most of those questions will be answered tonight. If there are additional questions, you can put those in the chat and we'll get to as many as we can. I do ask that you keep yourself on mute so that we can get through this and get to the questions at the end. Artie will let me know as well if there are important questions on a particular topic as we go through. We are recording this so that it can be shared. So here we go. What's a 501c3? What does that mean? Okay, that means that you are tax exempt under that code 501 section C section 3 of the Internal Revenue Code. You have to be organized and operated exclusively for tax exempt purposes. For us, it's education, community action. So one of the rules there is that the earnings cannot inure to any private shareholder or individual, meaning no one person can benefit from doing this. We don't have shareholders. We don't have um, people that we have to pay dividends to. We don't answer to them. We are operating for the interest of our stated purpose, which is the mission that we just read. And you need to stick to that. Otherwise, you can lose your 501c3. Okay. Yeah. What does all that mean? So I go into a little bit more detail here. Your IRS determination letter, and I know we have some issues here because of the collapse of Maryland PTA, the startup of Free State PTA, but not being able to get our group exemption. We'll get into all of that. But if you have your IRS determination letter still, keep that forever and always. If you have one from Delaware PTA, keep that as well. That is what says that you are a charitable exempt organization. And that's your proof, and it goes in your permanent files. That sounded eerily like your permanent record that you always heard about in school. Don't know where those are now. But you have to operate exclusively for um, our mission, towards our mission, purposes toward our mission. Anything else has to be an insubstantial part of your activities. So you'll hear about that 3-to-1 rule in fundraising versus providing programming. It's not really a rule. It is guidance that comes about because the IRS says it has to be, your fundraising has to be an insubstantial part of your activities. So in order to do that, we say do 3 programming activities like having an assembly or having a play or the fair or something like that for every one fundraising activity that you do. That way you stay out of trouble. It's not really 3-to-1, but it's more than 2-to-1. So that's our guideline, and that's where that comes from. If you start to constantly raise money and you aren't giving back, their IRS could say, or the state of Maryland could say, how is this a nonprofit organization? How are you benefiting and following the students and following your mission? So you want to be cautious of that ratio. There's a whole list of things that are exempt purposes that count towards that: the education, relief of the poor, distressed, underprivileged, advancement of education or science, so science fairs, things like that, eliminating prejudice and discrimination. Those are all things that fall under what we can do. Okay? So any of those would be in the 3 category, not the 1 category. Action organization, no political activity, only limited, insubstantial amount of lobbying activities. What's the difference between lobbying and advocating? Essentially what you call it and how you go about doing what you are trying to do. Lobbying is typically someone who's paid to do the work. They have to register with the feds. They have to register with the state, whomever they're lobbying. They may bring about new legislation that they want, make suggestions. They may or may not get paid for it. Usually they do. So those things we cannot do. But when we're advocating for better schools, for stronger gifted education, stronger special education supports, things like that, that's not lobbying. Okay. So if you get into a situation where you really have a question about it and you're not sure, just reach out and we'll try to help you make that distinction and walk that line between lobbying and advocating, because it is a little tricky.
And Laura, we have a couple of questions that came up with the
Okay.
3-to-1. So does spending money fundraising on teacher appreciation count as programming?
Yes. If you are doing it for the purposes of, well, fundraising and supporting, I'm not really sure. I want to make sure I understand the
Yeah,
question.
so I guess it's separate. So I think the question is, does teacher appreciation count as programming?
Yes, the purpose of your teacher appreciation and those kinds of activities is to support the teachers so that they are more able to support the students, right? When their morale is up, their their teaching is coming to work every day and doing their job, teaching and working with our students who can sometimes be, that environment can sometimes be very frustrating. I'm not saying the students, just going to work in general. The higher their morale, the more comfortable they are, the happy they are in the job, just like everybody else, the better job they do. So that is the rationale behind that. You're supporting them to support the students. Do you want to spend half of your budget on teacher appreciation activities? No. Be very careful about that. Our mission is to support the students and their schools. There is a component, an argument to be made for the staff appreciation things, but it should not be a large portion of your budget.
Do you, Laura, just to follow up on that, do you have a recommendation of the portion of the budget that you've typically seen spent on like teacher appreciation or staff appreciation types of activities?
I've seen a lot be spent, but that was not the greatest idea because parents were like, wait a minute, what are we doing here? You will see your donations and your dues and your supports fall off when if that becomes the perception. I would say no more than 25% would be my guidance. I have not seen any written guidance from the IRS or anyone else about that. Um, and it is considered part of your mission. So when you fill out like your charitable organization forms, you break all of that down into how you spent the money, and that is part of your programming. It is not considered an administrative cost because GuideStar is one of the places you can look up if you want to donate to a charity, and they one of the things they look at is what's your ratio of administrative cost to the money you've raised. So are you spending it all on yourself or are you spending it on your mission? And so you want to be mindful of that ratio as well.
Got it. Thank you. And then one more question.
Mm-hmm.
For the ratio, would restaurant nights count as a collective count as one event, or would each restaurant event count as one event?
There's, I have not seen strict guidance on that either. And I do tend to put that as more in the an ongoing, like a book fair every day. The book fair is not a separate fundraising event. It's an ongoing thing. One thing that we did to make them more successful and make that more programmatic, so it really is a wash, is to partner with, particularly in secondary schools, groups in the school, SGA, the drama club, various organizations or groups, have them participate in that fundraising, that event for the dine out, right? With the funds designated to go to that organization rather than having them do the mini grant, do all the things, and you're determining how to make the money. Let them learn to raise their own money. So we got a lot of benefit out of it because all the parents from the drama club came to support the dine out night that was designated for the funds to go to them. The students got to learn, get involved, to get making the flyers, sharing that out, inviting family members and friends, and so we had a lot more people coming. So it was a win-win, and we were doing programming by giving the money to the drama club. We're supporting the drama club or whatever, SGA, whatever it was, and fundraising at the same time. So that was a wash. So that's one thing to consider.
Thank you. And just one more question. Does teacher reimbursement count as staff appreciation, or is that separate?
Um, it depends on what you're reimbursing for. If they brought snacks in for the week or for somebody's birthday or their monthly birthday thing or something like that, then that's going to be different than if you they did a mini grant because they needed calculators or chargers for the calculators in the classroom. Right? Then that's programming. So it really depends on what what they're being reimbursed for.
It says classroom supplies, books, binders, etc.
Programming. Just make sure that you are not paying for things that are education's responsibility, that are MCPS responsibility. We'll talk about that in a little bit, using a process that has the principal sign off on those requests, that this is not something that's already funded in MCPS budget and you're supplanting it instead of supplementing it. Okay. We keep moving because there is a lot of material here.
Yes.
Any other questions you have put
No,
in the chat?
not right now.
We'll circle back.
Yep. We
All
keep
right.
going.
Sure. This is really what we were just talking about. That's advocating versus lobbying, keeping it in substantial part, and charitable assets in perpetuity. This one is important too. If you raise money as a nonprofit organization, that money has to stay with a nonprofit organization, whether you stick around or not. So if your PTA shuts down, for instance, then you would, by law, have to give that money, any monies that you have left over or assets, to another nonprofit. Our bylaws in Maryland say that that money goes to Free State PTA. They are the nonprofit that gets our funds. So, and that is in our bylaws, so that is set in stone. But any nonprofit has to give, if it's raised as a tax deductible donation, it has to remain with that. You can't turn it over to a corporation then, right? So you can't go spend it at Best Buy. All right. Some hidden dangers that you want to be careful of that could endanger your tax exempt status. Enormment. That means one person or small group of people are getting benefit of the funds rather than the larger part of the whole. So if you are only giving a grant to one class in your whole school, and that's all that you have, that's all the money, or that's all that you ever give to is that one class because that one teacher always asks, be careful, because you want to make sure that you're opening that up to everybody and encouraging them to apply. If they don't, they don't. But you want to make sure that you're putting it out to everybody so that everyone's aware of it. And it's not just this one teacher that knows about it. You can't do like funds for giving funds to someone who had a tragedy in their family, or someone who's out ill, sending flowers, things like that. That is enormous to one individual. That's your nonprofit funds going to benefit one individual, and that's not allowed. The lobbying, the political activity we talked about, you can have political activities, you can have debates, you can have discussions. If it's election season, you have to invite everybody that's running in that race. So if you're doing just a district race, say for county council, you don't have to invite everybody that's running for county council. You can invite just the ones that are running in your district. And that's fine, and they don't all have to come, but you do have to invite them so that you're apolitical. Nonpartisan is the better term for that. If you were inviting members from other districts, county council at large, you have to invite everybody who is running in that race, whichever race that is, even if it's state or federal. Unrelated business income, we talked about that in a little bit too. That's like excessively doing car washes, excessively doing t-shirt sales and selling this and selling that. There's constant fundraisers. That's really the problem, and not necessarily following that 3-to-1 guidance. And failure to file your required returns and forms. That will get you. If you don't file your 990 with the IRS for 3 straight years, you will get revoked. I know there are a number of PTAs that are still in that status, and we're working to get your 501c3 back, and then we'll get you in good standing with the state. That's a lot easier than the feds, but we're working on that. That happened a lot because of COVID and partially because of the collapse of Maryland State PTA and some actions taken there that have done this. So the IRS is short-staffed, and they are doing some rule changes that are taking literally years, that are holding us up and making that more difficult. If you run into problems filing your returns, because some have now gone to, you can only file online, can't file a paper return, but it won't accept the online report because it says you're revoked. Let us know and we'll help you work through that. All right. Why do you want to be a tax exempt organization? Why is that such a big deal? Why, why worry about keeping it? Well, because to get donations from folks, they often do that in order to get a tax deduction, right? If a charitable giving, if they're giving to the PTA, that's great. But if you're not a 501c3, their donation is no longer tax deductible or potentially tax deductible. So you may not get those donations. They'll give it to someone else who is in good standing and can take that deduction. I never say your donation is tax deductible. There's a statement at bottom of most places that solicit donations as a nonprofit that says your donation may be tax deductible. Consult with your accountant, right? Or the IRS for clarity. Something along those lines, because if you say it is tax deductible, then someone may count on that and try to take that tax deduction in a way that is not suitable for them. Maybe they've already maxed out their deductions at the end of the year, but PTA said that this was tax deductible, so I get to take that too. And then they get into trouble with the IRS because there are caps on it and what you can take. So I use the language may be tax deductible, or just that we are a tax exempt 501c3, and leave it at that. Because we don't know their tax situation. We are exempt from federal income tax for the most part. If we're following our mission and we're not doing, there's other things that we just said you can't do, or doing the unrelated business of constant car washes or selling t-shirts or things that aren't related to our mission. Okay. Now, would it count if there's an educational statement on the t-shirt that you're selling? Maybe. I don't know. You can make the argument, but just be mindful of sticking close to your mission. You can also potentially get an exemption for state income, sales, and employment taxes. We cannot pay for, let me say, we should not pay for staff. And the reason that we say that is there are rules at MCPS that they have to follow, and us paying for staff is challenging. It's not out of the question, but it's quite challenging to work through all of those. The bigger problem is that if you hire staff, even for one event where you're paying them directly, or for a club or something like that, the IRS may come to you and say you're an employer, so now you owe us their taxes, the taxes you should have withheld from them. You're going to get penalized for not withholding it and sending that in. You're going to have to pay the employer's share of your Medicare and Social Security, and the employee's share of Medicare and Social Security that you didn't deduct, and on and on. And now you're an employer and you've got to have an EIN and do all that's authorized to have employees. And that is not a place that most of us want to go. We don't have the expertise and staff to do that. So you can work out with the school where they have someone stay. Most of the time you'll have a staff member that will volunteer to stay. You can do stipends if it exceeds that $600 mark that we'll also get to. Then you may have to issue them a 1099. Do not pay them like an hourly thing, like $50 an hour every week or something like that. Then you're really into that employer status. Okay. And reduced postal rates. Not sure many of us are mailing things now, so I'm not sure how much of a benefit that is as much as it used to be. PTA is a business. Each and every PTA is its own entity, its own nonprofit organization. It is not personal. It's all about the business, just like it says. It is not your money. It is not to ever touch an individual's bank account. The funds have to go into PTA business. It should never be commingled with school or personal funds at all. Only use the PTA bank account. Where we run into trouble with that with someone setting up a Venmo or a Cash App or something like that, and as an individual, which means it has to go to their individual account and then they transfer it to the PTA. That should not happen. You have to set up a business Venmo account, and you can do it as a nonprofit. Some will not charge you fees, some still do, but it's got to be a separate business account that goes into your business PTA account. Yeah.
So, Laura, before you move on to the fiduciary responsibilities, there's a question in the chat. Do membership dues count as donations to the PTA for tax purposes, less
Yes.
any item they're getting in exchange? And then second part to the question, what about the amount someone pays above the cost for spiritware?
Yeah, we're going to get into that in a little bit. And yes, your dues are donations because you're not directly giving them something in return. You can give them some little tchotchke, like a mug or something like that, a $6 mug or a $5 mug for joining. It says I'm a PTA, proud PTA parent or something like that. But it can't exceed $11.10. Don't ask me. It's indexed to inflation. I don't know why it's now at $11.10, and I think it still says 11.20 in here. It's an odd number. But if you give them something that exceeds that over the course of the entire year, then you've got some other obligations that you have to do. So we'll get to that. But yes, let's say you do a fundraiser that you charge $100 a ticket for a dinner. The cost of the dinner is $50. The other $50 is tax deductible. They're getting a $50 meal, so that is not tax deductible. They're getting something in return. Hope that answered that question. We'll get more in depth when we get to that part.
Yeah, and I'll if we don't cover it, then we'll circle back.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Board of Directors, fiduciary and personal responsibilities. Everybody on the board is collectively and individually responsible for what happens on the board. The decisions it makes, the way it's run, the funds, the use of them, the raising, all of it. So you want to make sure that you know these rules, which is why this training is required, so that you don't run afoul of them and get yourself into a pickle. Your elected officers are your president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. The ones with the asterisks, the president, secretary, and the treasurer, are required for every nonprofit in the state of Maryland. That's the law. If you don't have one of them, try to get somebody, whoever's in that position now, to stay on. Even if they're not terribly actively involved, they should still be reading minutes and coming to meetings, hopefully. Over the summer, this is not that big of a deal because most PTAs don't meet much over the summer. But they are still responsible if they're on the board. So they want to be aware of what's going on because, as you'll see in the duties of care, you have reason to know if you're on the board, you're able to go to the meetings, you get the minutes. Not knowing is not an excuse. Not going to the meetings is not an excuse for not knowing, and does not excuse your responsibility. Right, so read through your bylaws, make sure all of your board members have bylaws. All your members should have access to your bylaws. Put them on your webpage. It helps to give you clarity about, like, what do I do with this? I need to have an emergency meeting. How do I do that? It's in your bylaws. It's probably the one thing we say the very most. Read your bylaws. It'll tell you how many days notice you have to give. How do you remove somebody who's not showing up for meetings? How do you, almost everything that you need to do for the basic functions is in your bylaws. Okay. Your Board of Directors also includes, well, I'm going to back up here. This is your executive committee. A lot of times we'll get questions about that. These are your elected officers, president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. That's your executive committee. The board of directors also includes your elected officers that we just talked about, the standing committee chairs, delegates to the council, principal or their designee. Yes, they are a board member. NAACP representative, if you have one, your student representative for secondary schools. We do have a couple of elementary schools that actually have student members. You can have, there's nothing that says you can't, but typically we see that in middle schools and high schools. And having the student voice there is critically important, even for the littles in elementary school. If you want to know what the students want, what would interest them, ask them. You know, work with a staff member or PCC or somebody to have a lunch bunch or something where you sit down with a group of kids and find out, you know, what do you think about this idea? And they're like, no, that's, you know, or yeah, let's do that. And then you know what they want. If you're doing things that you think they'll want without asking them, you know, nothing about us without us. If you're doing it without asking them, then you may have less success than you would have if you'd done something that they were really excited about and talked up and got their parents to come to and their friends to come to and things like that. So it's just good practice. And your parliamentarian, most local PTAs do not have that. MCC PTA occasionally will engage a parliamentarian. They, in our bylaws, they are on the board, but they're non-voting. So if you have an occasion, usually when it's a massive undertaking, like for our, our advocacy priorities, or if we're doing bylaws changes, something like that, it can get complicated with motions on motions on motions, and they help to keep that straight. But it's rare that we actually engage one. If you need to, you should make sure that you have an agreement ahead of time with your board and your members, that it's something that your board and members have voted on, to say what they can and can't do, whether the parliamentarian's voting or not, things like that. And when all else fails, look it up in Robert's Rules of Order. If it's not stated in your bylaws, and you don't have standing rules, or it's not in your standing rules, then we follow Robert's rules. All right. What's a fiduciary? What does that mean? And what are my fiduciary responsibilities? You'll hear that a lot. That's anybody that holds something of trust. In this case, mostly money. We don't have property and a lot of other things of value, but monetary value, I should say. We're holding that money in trust. We've been entrusted by the parents and the donors and the sponsors and all the folks that have given us money to help our students, trusting that we will do just that with that money. We are charged with holding that and the well-being of PTA for our members, keeping it going, making sure that everything is done ethically and legally, that we're meeting all of our responsibilities, and we're not going to lose our 501c3. We'll still be around next year because we won't lose it because we did something wrong. And this is critically important. The board of directors, remember, that's all of these people, elected officers all the way down, are individually and collectively responsible for what happens. And you can delegate, but the duties, but not the responsibility. Right? You are still ultimately responsible. If you delegate to parents, a group of parents, or a committee for book fair, you're still responsible for making sure that that money all ties out, that everything got into the PTA account, that the book fair folks got paid, whoever you're using, all of that still comes back to the board. Okay. And that's where we are with the duties of care. 3 major ones and an additional one. The duty of care is not just to the PTA, but to society. Pay attention to the organization's activities and operations, making sure that you're following staying within those rules for the IRS and the state, local, all of your other applicable laws and rules so that you stay in good standing. The duty of loyalty, to be clear, this is loyalty to the organization, not to any one person, not to the president, not to anybody. It's to the organization. I've seen this go terribly, terribly wrong, and that's why we no longer have Maryland PTA, to be frank. The duty of loyalty is to the organization and the students that we serve. Above all else, personal and professional interests, anything else, doesn't matter. Just the kids. It's all about the kids. Same with the duty of obedience. It's not to an individual. It is to comply with all federal, state, local laws and the organization's bylaws and your standing rules if you have them, and be the guardians of that mission, making sure that everything you do serves the mission. And then the disclosure is the one that is not listed here as the three that typically get cited. The disclosure means that not only your financial information, but also your non-financial information. So your minutes, your activities, your discussions about priorities, your advocacy, all of that is public information. We are a member organization, and that should be shared with your members. That should not be coveted by the board or hidden or anything else. You want a quick way to lose members? Stop telling them what you're doing. Right? That will not only get you in trouble, but it will also lose your members really quickly and the trust and support. So make sure that you're sharing that information, sending the minutes out, getting input and engaging people as much as you can. As I said, you can delegate, you cannot abdicate. Giving the responsibility for getting something done to another on the board's behalf, chairs or committees, is great, and you should do that. We cannot do everything as a 4 or 5 person board. Definitely bring them in, keep them in the loop, but also be involved, stay involved, watch what's happening, and double check and triple check, because you still have ultimate responsibility for that. And remember, your committee chairs are board members too. So they're going to have some shared responsibility, but it does not relieve the other board members. Okay, good spot. Any questions?
So there were a couple of questions which you may cover later, but one was related to paying teachers a separate contractor ID, for example, if they were a DJ at an event.
Oftentimes, if you're paying someone, like they have a side job as a DJ, they probably have a license. If they're a licensed business and you're hiring them, then you don't have to give them that 1099 at the end of the year, because they're licensed and they have agreed and are required to report all of their income. Many places still do if they pay them over 600. But if it's just an individual who happens to have the equipment and you pay them, $500 to come and do an event, or $250 to come and do an event, they still have an obligation to report it, but you do not have an obligation to give them a 1099 until you hit $600. Then you must. So if they do an event at the beginning of the year for $250, and they do another one at mid-year for $250, you're still good. If they do one at the end of the year for another $250, now you've crossed that threshold and you're going to have to give them that 1099. Well, actually, that's not true, because I just split it over 2 calendar years. The 1099 follows a calendar year because that's how most people file their individual taxes. So let's say they did 3 between August and December, then you would have to give them a 1099. But if you have someone doing something in the spring, make sure that's in your records, and you're looking back as, let's say you're coming in as a new treasurer for next year, look and see if you paid that person in between January and June of 2025, when you pay them between July 1 and December 31st of 2025. If that adds up to more than $600, then you need to give them a 1099.
Okay, thanks, Laura. And then kind of a related question. We were told that we had to pay staff cost maintenance to rent an MCPS auditorium for an event. Are there any issues with that?
No, because you're paying that to the school. They're employees of the school. You're reimbursing them for costs that they've incurred for personnel and services rendered. That's no different than if you went and rented a hall somewhere. I hope all of you know now that though I'll share it because it's relatively new, we no longer have to pay for the facility, for the use of a school facility as PTA. You're supposed to work with your principal. If you have an issue with them and that's not working out, you can work with principal at another school to use that school, or you can contact the principal's boss. Already seen that happen. But you can use, PTAs can use the school facilities at no charge now. That does not include personnel for cleanup or security, building services or security, that kind of thing. You may still be charged for that. But that is, as I said, contracting, you're reimbursing the school for those costs. You are not hiring them. Now, if you gave them cash out of pocket, we can't do cash business like that as PTA. So that's already one strike. And another is that then you may be considered an employer, write the check to the school for that cost and get a receipt from them and keep that in your books as your backup, and you're safe.
So Laura, further kind of clarification on that with the new rule. So my understanding was that it's similar to like an outside group that is reserving the space, right? So you normally had to pay for that. The PTA no longer has to. There's a question in the chat saying that the principal is uncomfortable with this because then she needs to be there for the event if the PTA is reserving space. Is that true?
No, they do not need to be there. Some are overly cautious, or I should say more cautious. I don't know if it's overly cautious, but more cautious than others. Particularly new principals feel like somebody needs to be there. But a men's basketball group can rent the auditorium or the gym to have a basketball game. And there's no requirement that there be a staff member, a principal, or an assistant principal or anything like that there for them.
Right.
They may require security, but they are usually there. This happens in a lot of our high schools. But no, that is not, to my knowledge, a requirement that they be there. And as I said, if you're having issues, I brought this up when they put that rule out, that not all principals were going to want to do events in their schools or have great relationships between the principal and the PTA, and we will help you navigate that as well. And that we may have some that just won't. Before you could just go on and book it on CUPF, the Community Use Public Facilities, and there was really no conversation about it. You reserve that day and time. And we got the building for one meeting per month for PTAs. But now we can use that. Obviously, we don't want to be excessive with it, but we can use the facilities at no charge. And you should be able to have events for your school in your school.
Right. So it's a distinction between if the principal or the school booked it on behalf of the PTA and that like before versus the PTA booking it directly. And then now with the new guidance, or it's not guidance, but rule, whatever, the PTA doesn't have to pay for it. So
correct.
Right. Okay.
If you go into CUPF and book it yourself, they're going to charge you. That's the way it's set up. But you work with your principal to have them do it and you're not charged. I mean, to me, it makes sense. We've already paid for the schools with our tax dollars. Yeah. And we are the PTA serving the schools, their students, their staff. and families. It never made sense to me that we had to pay for it to begin with, and now we don't.
Got it.
But if you're
And
having
then,
issues with that, definitely reach out to us. We'll help you navigate it, to your cluster coordinator or your area vice president, or to anybody on MCC PTA executive board. We'll get you with the right person. You can also just email your principal's boss.
okay, thanks, Laura. And
Mhm.
then just to follow up to that, what about when the use of facilities is by an MCC PTA committee versus an individual local PTA?
No difference. You work with that principal to schedule it, and you don't pay for the use of the facility. As I said, staff, security, building services may have a cost associated, but you're not paying for the facility itself.
Okay. And then a clarification on um does a book fair. So does a book fair count as a fundraising? Does it count as fundraising or a program?
Yes. so so that's one of those like we discussed before with the dine outs that are helping a specific support a specific group in your school, a student group. Okay. So it is a fundraiser, but it is also putting books in the students' hands. Okay. So as far as that 3-to-1 rule, that one's a little bit trickier because of the funding and the amount of money that generally rolls through there. But that is both. Okay.
Okay.
And one of the things that we did to help make that even more true was to take our scholastic dollars, for instance, and we created gift certificates for enough to get at least one book. So $15, $20. And then we gave those to the school to give to students who would likely otherwise not be able to get a book. They sometimes they gave them specifically to, and we didn't want to know who it was, who they're giving them to, that may be farm students, that may be having some other situation. We didn't want to be able to identify them or for the students to be able to identify, oh, you have one of those gift certificates, right? Um, so what we did was made additional ones that we gave to teachers, like all the English teachers, and they gave them out in various ways. Some did a lottery drawing of their students' names. Some had them write something or do some activity. Um, they used various methods to determine who got that certificate. So when they showed up at the book fair with that gift certificate, we had no idea whether they got it from their teacher or they got it from the counselors or someone else, or why they had it, how they got it. We didn't care. But we didn't want anybody else to know either. The students actually got all really excited with, oh, you want a gift certificate. No matter how they got it, they didn't know. They knew that one was given away in their English class, and they assumed that everybody else won it too. That put books in the hands of students who may not have otherwise gotten a book of their own. They also used, of course, I think most schools do this, is to um, use the scholastic dollars to buy books for the library in your school, or let the library intermediate specialist select books that are appropriate for the school library. So between those two activities and just generally getting books in the schools, now those gift certificates were not good for tchotchkes. They had to get a book. Just FYI. Um, that helped make it a both program and fundraiser. So again, it was a wash.
Great. And then one more related to kind of fundraising versus programs. So collection of money, like at a program, for example, selling concessions like chips, drinks at a science fair.
Hmm. Well, it is both, and they're unrelated, right? So you're doing the programming with the science fair, and you're doing a fundraiser side by side. So you have one of each. It's not like the book fair that and the other example that I've already forgotten, where it's kind of both.
The
tied
book,
into one.
yeah.
They're separate things, but you've still done one of each. So you're still exceeding that 3-to-1 rule, or negating it. So you did one fundraiser and you've done one of your three programming activities. So you do the science fair, bake sale, whatever. You do the science fair itself as a program. Then you have a play, that's a program. You have a dance, that's a program. And you're good.
Sounds good. And then the last question was going back to earlier, the spiritware, like if somebody pays above the cost for spiritware, how is that related to for like tax purposes or
Yeah, the value of the shirt is not tax deductible. Anything they pay over and above the value is tax deductible. So if you buy $6 shirts and or $10 shirts and they pay $25 for it, 15 of it is tax deductible, 10 is not. The value of the item is not deductible. The value of the that exceeds that value, the money that exceeds that value, that is tax deductible.
great. I think that's it for now.
Okay, I'm gonna keep moving. What time are we at? I can't see my clock.
7:29.
Okay. Yikes. All right. Do you want to take a 5-minute bio break and come back? Just give everybody a chance to stretch their legs, and then we'll get into the treasure basics and address that question again. So we'll give everybody 5 minutes. So we'll come back at 7:35. We'll give you 6.
So generous.
Yeah, I know. Don't tell anybody. Okay, welcome back. Hopefully everybody got to take a little break. All right. Okay. So treasurer's basics.
So we're
I'm gonna get to this question. I'm sorry.
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Priscilla asked a question that we'll get into a little more depth later, but about the delegate, don't abdicate. So you're having a book fair. You're the president of your local PTA who's having a book fair. You have a book fair committee. May or may not have a chair, but you have a book fair committee, and they run the book fair. And they're depositing the money every other day-ish instead of every day. Or they're putting it in the school safe or somewhere, or someone's taking home with them. When you go to reconcile the payment for the books that were sold, you realize that there were only 4 days that were deposited and not 5. One of the deposits got lost or stolen or whatever happened. That money never made it to the bank. You check with your insurance. You want to try to make a claim for that insurance, for the insurance for those funds, but you don't really know what happened. You are still responsible for that, whatever happened.
No, just a bit.
Please mute. Keep yourselves on mute. Thank you. Artie, let me make you co-host so you can mute. I'm sorry, I should have done that earlier. You had a responsibility to follow up on that and to make sure that they were informed to deposit every day, make sure that that was happening, and check those receipts immediately after the book fair, not a month later or 2 months later when people can't remember what happened with it. You have abdicated your responsibility. You said, well, that was the committee. I didn't, I gave it to them. It's not my fault, not my responsibility. I don't know what happened to it. You may not know what happened to it, but it is your responsibility. Okay. Obviously, we don't want to have a situation like that, but things do happen. Sometimes somebody might be filling in at the school and you had a bag of money from the book fair sitting in their safe, and someone came in and said, we're not supposed to have cash on hand. I'm depositing this. They put it in the school account. it's rectifiable, but then you've got to have a paper trail. They have to have a paper trail. The number of processes were violated in doing that. Um, Maybe it was left in the car and it was stolen and they didn't notice because they don't normally have a PTA bag of money sitting in the car. It didn't occur to them, or they thought they had deposited. So whatever happened to it, you are still responsible as a board member. All the board members are responsible to make sure that happens. So it really forces you to work together and verify everything. Trust but verify, and go through your rules and make sure you understand what's supposed to be done and how, and that is what's actually happened. I hope that helps, Priscilla. Okay. All right. Treasurer's basics. First things, I've mentioned this already, review your bylaws. Make sure that others have your bylaws, all your members, all your board members especially, because they need to know what they're responsible for and what you can and cannot do, and how you go about doing those things that you can do. Review the financial guides. There is a financial guide on Free State PTA's website. I will send that out to you and the link to it. I suggest using the link rather than a static PDF because they do sometimes make updates. It's been a while since they did, and there are some errors in there. So if you find something that's counter to what you've been doing or counter to what you've heard or been told in this training, reach out and we can help get you guidance on that. Maybe I got it wrong. Maybe I got, who knows? But there are some things in there that are in error that weren't caught in the last revision, and hopefully they will be revised soon again and made correct. But most of it is correct, say 99% of it, and should be used as your guide for all things financial. And also keeping the training materials, the things that I'll send to you, the things that you'll get at other trainings, those are important. We create and share that information to help make your jobs easier, not have to reinvent the wheel. It also lends itself to standardization across PTAs. So if you have someone that's doing your financial review that's done 4 or 5 others, things look more uniform and it's a little easier and quicker to do. You're making sure that if you're donating money to the school and everybody's using the same form that is provided by the insurance company, then we're making sure we're doing everything right. If you make up your own forms and your own stuff, that's fine as long as you collect and get all the same information. So using the training materials, taking the trainings, those things are important. Planning your transition meetings with your outgoing treasurers. And this is not just treasurer, this is every board member. Artie is here tonight. She is the incoming VP of Admin. So we've been working quite a bit together and will continue to even past the end of the month when I turn over everything to her. And she is the current VP and not the incoming. I won't just walk away and drop off the face of the earth. Sometimes that happens when someone's done with the PTA, they're done with the PTA. Like they move to another school, they move to another county or another state, sometimes out of the country. From this region, we get a lot of people that just move out of the country. If you don't do the transition before they go and get all the information you need from them, you may never get that information. And as you'll see in a bit, some of those records are required to be kept forever. So you need to be very diligent about the transfer for all your positions. That includes the signatures on the bank cards for the new officers. Make sure you change those. I walked into this treasurer position at one point, and the treasurer from 3 terms ago was still on the bank account. They were still cashing checks. They were still taking our money, but the cards were not correct. So technically, we didn't have the prior 2 administrations didn't have any authorization to spend any money from our bank account. Don't do that. Make sure you do those things. Take care of, cross the T's, dot the I's, whatever. Passwords are another critical thing. We highly recommend that you use position specific emails. So president at Clarksburg High School at gmail.org or .com, whatever it is. That way you would turn over the password. They would immediately change the password so they have access to it, control of that account. But the new president would have all the history of discussions you were having with vendors or parents or principal. They would have records of any disputes with charges or anything. All of that stuff is there. It's a great learning tool, and it's also great backup for protecting yourselves and your PTA, because somebody could come in as soon as they know you have a new PTA president or treasurer and say, I did this work for you and you owe me this money. And you have no access to any of the email. You can't reach any of the prior board members. And what do you know? How you're going to defend yourself if they decide to sue you? Okay? So you want to make sure that you know that you have that access, and that means turning over those passwords to your Canva account, to your Gmail, to all of those things, to the website, so that can stay current. I've seen PTAs have to shut down the website and restart another one because they couldn't get into the other one. Givebacks is another big one. PTA, Free State PTA requires that all of our compliance documents be uploaded into Givebacks. A whole lot of PTAs can't do that because way back when, somebody set up a Givebacks account, but that somebody never turned over the password. So now nobody can get into it, and we have to go to Givebacks to get them to reset it. There's no forgot my password, redo that option with Givebacks. So, and often even when there is with others, you have to have the phone number or access to the phone number because they're on file, they're going to send a code. So make sure you get those things. This is in bold and critically important, should probably be first on the list. Make sure that you only accept financial records and responsibility for the funds when the books have already been reviewed and approved. Do not walk in as treasurer on July 1st and start writing checks and doing financial transactions and accepting responsibility for the condition and the position of your finances when they haven't been reviewed from the prior treasurer. That is to cover yourself and the prior treasurer, and to make sure that you are starting on a good foot where your books are balanced. You don't have errant checks that never got cashed and you don't know who it was to, or you don't know what it was for, or how to, if you had to void it, where do you put it back? What account does it go back to because you don't know what it was for? Things like that. Make sure that those books are reviewed and everyone knows the condition that they're in, whether they're great, everything was fine, the review committee says, yep, we'll sign off, it's good, or they're mostly good. We got a couple of things that you need to tweak, like you didn't have backup on a few of the transactions, and you should have that there. And then that prior treasurer goes and gets that backup and puts it in if they can get it. Or they're a complete mess and we don't know what happened here. But this is the bank balance, this is what you have in the bank according to the bank. And we recommend that you just start from that balance. Or maybe that you close that account and start a new one because it's so messed up. I've seen all of those happen. And if someone has already started writing checks, it's harder to close the account because now you have an outstanding account or outstanding checks or deposits even. It just complicates things greatly because if someone looks deeper into the accounts and something nefarious was going on previously, they now have the ability to say, wasn't me. They changed the records after I gave it to them. Who do you have in the middle that had custody of those books to review those books to say, nope, this happened on their watch and nothing has happened yet on this treasurer's watch or board's watch for that matter. It's critically important that you only take those books after they're reviewed. Artie, is there a question?
There is a question related to the transition meetings and what is the best practice in terms of the transition meeting with the outgoing treasurer and when should the transition meeting take place?
So you should start those conversations as soon as the elections are done. If the treasurer is not returning or any board member is not returning, they should, or they're changing positions, they should start those conversations with the incoming officer to plan that out. Like, when will you have the email ready to be turned over? Have that worked out. Is it going to be on June 30th or July 1st, or will you have it ready for before that? What are the things I should know? Is there anything pending? What's going on with the principal? Like, what should I avoid doing to keep a good relationship with the principal? What have you learned from that relationship, or with who else? Who do you go to if you need this done or that done? Who are your allies in the school that can help you get things done, right? Not
Yeah.
that they're not all allies, but there's that one person, right? Um, and
And
turning
with,
over those records.
yeah, thank you. And then with respect to like the timing of the meetings, should it be until July 1st? Any meeting that's conducting PTA board business would be the, not the new board, but the current board, because the new board doesn't take office until July 1st. Is that an
That's
accurate
that's
statement?
correct. But in these transmission meetings, you're sharing information and filling in the new person coming in, and it's their chance to ask questions of someone who's been doing that job and get that vital information that doesn't necessarily convey on paper. It
Got
is
it.
not making board decisions. You're not voting. You're not creating budgets. You're not doing any of the things that the board does and should do publicly. You are working with your predecessor to make the transition smooth and have all the information you need to be able to do what you were elected to do.
Got it.
But
And
no,
so,
no votes, no, actions taken by the board. Planning, brainstorming, thinking about what you might do in the coming year. Those conversations may come up and happen, but nothing is voted on or approved um, by portions of the board. And generally, this is like the treasurer meeting with the treasurer, president meeting with the president, things like that.
okay, so would the transition meeting be considered an official meeting that includes the rest of the exec board members, or is it more like you were just saying, like one-on-one?
It can go either way. If it is the entire board, the outgoing board, because they are still in office, they are technically holding a meeting if the majority is there, and could get a little tricky. Probably should be open. Doubtful anybody would come, but it's possible. If it was a contested election, and somebody might show up and have, something to say about something that's happening. Um, they're generally good conversations to have. Like, if you're having your executive committee only, executive committees meet all the time anyway. So incoming and outgoing executive committees meeting, having conversations like brainstorming high level, you know, here's where we're working on, kind of thing, sharing that transitional information. I have no concern with that. When you get into the whole board, you've got so many moving parts with committees and committee chairs and all that. Um, yeah, you may want to have basically a public meeting as a transition meeting for that. But for most of the transition meetings here that I'm talking about at this level, that's a one-on-one, because you need to know what you need to know to do your job, not running the whole PTA. That's going to be a discussion with your members. There should be a discussion with your members and others.
Thank you. And then there are two questions related about the books. So the first is, do we need an accountant to review our books? And then the second is, who should review the books?
Okay. Just about to get to that. So timing is everything. Your financial review committee you need to follow their recommendations. If they say, the rules require that you do this, or that you have the minutes, for instance, when you pass a budget or a budget amendment, and you don't have those minutes, you need to put those minutes in the books. You need to make them right as best you can when they come back with a report. And then that review report goes to your membership at your first meeting to approve. And that's when it's submitted to Free State and everything. You do not need to have an auditor unless you're getting substantial money from any federal government. And then I want to talk to you about how you're doing that or any government entity. Or you raise above $50,000 in a year, you start to get into areas where you may have to engage an auditor. That's going to cost money. That's a paid, more thorough review of the books, an actual audit. That can cost you hundreds or even thousands of dollars in some cases. So you want to shop around if you are in a position where you need to do that, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Generally, it's 3 people who are not signers on your account, or the extra reviewer that we'll also get to. So you need 3 people. What works best is if you work either within your cluster or you're within the elementary schools in your area, whatever that is, and you review their books and they review your books. Okay, you do like a round robin. Sometimes we get together at a restaurant or something, have breakfast, have lunch, everybody reviews the books, we pass them around, and everybody goes home. The fall training, we often have a round table at the end where we'll do financial reviews or help people that are just stuck. Somebody tried to do their financial review and couldn't get it to balance. They don't know what's wrong. Tip, it's generally in your checks that were outstanding at the end of the prior year. That's usually where it is. So look at that if you're not balancing. I highly recommend that for the treasurer, you do that financial review before you turn your books over to the review committee. It's because you know what those transactions are. You'll recognize an odd amount. Oh, I know what that was. And you can correct the records then. They may have to hunt for hours to try to find that transaction. All this is, I don't want you to be afraid of the financial review. All it is a bank rec for the full year. What did you start the year with? How much did you add in the bank? How much did you spend out of the bank? And what's left? And does it balance? Right? It's a giant bank reconciliation for the year. So if you do that pencil copy, we call it, before you turn them over, you will get your books back and be ready to roll a lot sooner than if they have to go hunt down these pieces, because remember, they're all volunteers too. Can you engage an auditor? Yes, you can. And if you have an auditor or an accountant do your review, you don't need 3 people. You just need that person, that one qualified person to sign off on them. So you will need the financial review from the prior year to get a good starting balance, to make sure you are starting in the right place. And those previous files and permanent records, you want to make sure you get those to your IRS designation letter and all of those things that are supposed to be in your permanent record. You should keep them. Make sure that you verify that your insurance is paid and active. That's due on July 1 or June 30th or July 1. I highly recommend that you pay that right now to your insurance company. You should have already gotten your bill for it. Pay AIM your insurance now, because once June 30th comes, those books are closed for this fiscal year. And until that financial review gets done, you can't pay anything else out of it. At which point, your insurance premiums would be late. You would have a late fee. And if you have a loss or anything occurs in that period in between, you're not covered. So you always want to make sure you pay your insurance and keep your proof that it's paid and active before June 30th. Also, if you have dues that are owed to Free State PTA or MCC PTA, you need to pay those right now. Get them in before June 30th. If you pay your current year right now, dues for any number of members that you have after June 30th, you also have to pay the increased rate, the higher rate for National PTA. Their dues go up $1 come July 1. So if you collected your dues based on that 225 that they charge right now, and then come July 1, you got to pay 325, you're losing $1 on every one of those. You didn't budget for and you didn't collect from the member. You didn't adjust your dues, right? So pay your dues now. Pay your insurance now. Those are two really important things to do at the end of before the end of the year. If you haven't gotten your bill from AIM, there's information on how to contact them at the end. Maybe it went to prior president's email or prior treasurer's email, particularly if they weren't position specific emails. They were personal emails. But when you get those books, you want to make sure that all of these things are done and that you're covered. Okay. Some of your tools, I'm going to pick up the pace a little bit on this. So you'll have these slides. These are things that you're going to need and want to keep handy. Your leadership guides and cash management guides, your proposed budget, prior budgets. That's going to help you figure out what your proposed budget is. All the PTSAs and PTAs in Maryland operate on a fiscal year of July 1st to June 30th. Most. I had to change most, all to most, because when Maryland PTA imploded, the person who stuck around sent an email to the IRS or whatever, a letter to the IRS and said, these organizations are no longer under our umbrella and they are non-compliant. Remove their 501c3 status. And they did for a lot. Some they caught and it didn't happen. They stopped it, but the ones that had already been removed have fought to get it back and get that straightened out. We're still fighting that, working on that. But in the process, some of the fiscal years got changed to a calendar year as well. If you've tried to file your return and it said, this is not your fiscal year is a calendar year or some other random dates, let us know. It's a very simple form. It's linked at the bottom of this slide, IRS Form 1128 right here, that you can use to change your fiscal year back to the July 1, June 30. Because all of our deadlines and guidelines, when we have to give everything to Free State to show our compliance, is based on that fiscal year. I highly recommend that you stick with it. We do all operate on a cash basis. We don't run accounts receivable and accounts payable and all those things. You count the money when it comes in. You count the payments when they go out. If you get an electric bill or not electric bill, but like a Canva bill or something like that on June 29th and you don't pay it then, you don't count that as paid in the current year. You count it in the following year when you actually pay it. So that's going to go against that year's expense. That means that you need to be aware of what your typical year-end expenses are when things come due and preemptively try to pay them now. Because if you have the money in the budget for this year, it does not automatically show up in next year. It doesn't roll over. Everything stops and you have a new budget. So you want to make sure that you pay the things that you have in the budget this year so that it doesn't impact next year's and make it look like the price, the cost doubled or the funding line but doubled. I hope that makes sense. It's income when it is received, goes in the bank. It's an expense when the check is written and signed, not cashed. When it's paid, when it's considered paid when you send the check or make the payment online. All right. Duties, course completing the training, and your chair of the budget committee, if you have one. It's helpful. Most local PTAs do not, but they can help you monitor and prepare the budget, find errors if something's not balancing. Having that little extra help and extra set of eyes to look at things, making sure that things are put in the right category so you can track your expenses properly, stuff like that. Figuring out reports and fiduciary returns, they can be really helpful there. Sometimes we read things one way and interpret it, and it's just stuck in our head and we can't see past what's right there. But somebody else reads it and says, oh, well, it's just this. It happens to me all the time. Prepare a written treasurer's report for every meeting, whether that's executive committee, board of directors, whatever meeting is happening, you need to present a written financial report so that everyone knows what your financial status is, where you stand, what you budgeted compared to what you've actually spent, because you can budget $10,000 in sponsorships and $10,000 in expenses to use that money. But if you only get 2,000 in sponsorships, obviously you can't also spend 10. So you need to be monitoring that and make adjustments along the way. The budget is a living, breathing, changing document. It can be amended at any time. You just have to follow the rules of notice and making sure you have quorum and that your membership approves it. Also, upon request, if someone says, I need a treasurer's report because I'm going into a meeting with the principal about some big initiative that we want to maybe try to do, but I need to know where we stand. If your board or your membership requests a financial report, you have a duty to give it to them. That's that disclosure, duty to disclose. Pay all authorized financial obligations. Authorized means you have 2 signatures, you have it budgeted, and you have the money in the bank. All 4 must be true. And have 2 people authorize it, 2 signatures. You've got to have the money and you've got to have it budgeted. Any one of those means no check, no payment. Anyone missing? Collaborating with membership and fundraising chairs. Obviously, always having those conversations. And we'll talk about the different types of budget and why that's important when you're talking about, for instance, fundraising. Maybe one does well, one doesn't. You want to make sure you can adjust quickly on that. Maintaining organized records, making sure you're familiar with this retention schedule, what you have to keep for how long, all of that, and which I will also send to you. And that the records are organized in a way that a reasonable person could come behind you and see what happened. Now, if you were suddenly not there.
So Laura, we have a few questions that are popping up in the chat related to some of what you just shared.
Okay,
So
maybe
first, do you want to keep going?
Yeah, let me keep going right now because I think most of them I probably will hit, and if I don't, then we can circle back. But I want to make sure we get the rest of this in.
All right.
All right.
So everybody, keep your questions coming in the chat, and then
Yes,
we'll
please
address them at the end.
And if we don't get to them at the end, I mean, you can stay on afterwards if we run up to time, and or we will include those in our FAQs, because if you have a question, somebody else has the same question, I guarantee it. Please ask it, even if you just send it to Artie or myself, so that we can include that, because I promise you somebody else is wondering the same thing. All right. Your duties is obviously getting those checks in, making sure any checks going out have 2 signatures, even though the bank doesn't necessarily check. If you print your checks with 2 signature lines, it tells the person that's receiving the check, hey, there's supposed to be a second signature on here. Doesn't mean they won't take it, but it does give them some liability, part of that liability, if they cash that check with 2 signature lines and only 1 signature. So make sure you're printing your checks with 2 signature lines, not like the personal checks that only have 1. And following that rule with 2 signatures. Even if you're paying by credit card or something like that, we have 1 vote at the beginning of the year to be able to pay those recurring expenses that we have, memberships and subscriptions and that kind of thing, to be able to have them on the credit card every month. Anything else is going to require 2 signers to say, even if it's by email, 2 authorizations to say, yes, you can pay this expense. Even though you're paying it with a credit card or a debit card or an e-check, you still have to have 2 people authorize it, just as though they were signing a check. Keep all your receipts and necessary records according to the retention schedule that we'll get to. And giving all of your records and the passwords to your successors. Your bylaws probably say something like within 7 days of the end of your term, you turn over everything. Holding back information or documentation is not helpful to your PTA, and it is against your bylaws. Preparing your forms, and these are all linked in here. Here are the levels for how you file your 990. Every PTA must file a 990 every single year, every year. And this is another place where you need to make sure you're getting the passwords for the state and federal tax sites. With the state, it's the one-stop business site now. With the feds, it's the IRS website. You need to be able to get into those. So you need to have those passwords turned over as well. Add that to your list. For the 990 postcard only, if you have gross receipts less than 50,000, you can just do that online, and it's very simple, like 2-3 lines of entry, hit enter, and it's gone. Assuming you're in good standing with the IRS and they will take it electronically. If not, then we have to scrounge up an old paper form and send it in and say, hey, we filed. You wouldn't let me file it online, but we filed. If it's gross receipts are 50,000, more than 50,000, up to 200,000, then you're going to do the easy form. If you're bringing in over 200,000 a year for gross receipts, again, I want to talk. I want to know how. But you're going to have to file the full 990 form. If you, the 1099, 1096, that's the 1096 is very uncommon. The 1099 is if you've paid someone that is not a business, not a corporation, more than $600 in the year, you have to give them a 1099 and send a copy to the IRS. The IRS will make sure that they claimed it and all that, but you have to tell the IRS that you paid them that. The Maryland registrations, filings, and your annual financial report for charities, that's akin to the 990. Like the 990 and the postcard is really, really simple. It doesn't ask for all the information about who your officers are and how to contact them and all that. But you're going to end up putting it in here in this COF 85, or the exempt organization fundraising notice. So you're going to still need all of that information. If you do the full 990, then you don't have to do this. So you don't have to put all that information in there because they're communicating with the IRS. State sales and tax, state sales and use tax forms, you're also required to file if you have that state exemption. And the annual report of personal property. We are domestic non-stock corporations, all of our PTAs, meaning we don't have any assets. We don't own offices and boats and, all of those things. So, and we don't have stock. I'm sorry, that was for the property. And for the stock, non-stock, we don't have shareholders that we're reporting to. We don't have anybody we're paying dividends to. That's why we fall in this category. So it's usually 0. If it's not 0, you may want to recheck your information that you put in. But if you don't file it, then it comes with a late fee of at least $50. Oftentimes you can get out of that if you write to them, explain what happened, but maybe not. So you want to make sure that you file that timely. And the insurance renewal and payment, of course, for AIM. The records retention schedule, you can see that the most important part there is things you have to keep forever. Your articles of incorporation, all financial reviews or audits, any IRS documents that they send you, if it's a letter, if it's a determination letter or revocation and reinstatement, whatever it is, you have to keep it forever. Insurance records, facts that you paid it, claims, all of those things, and your minutes. Never, ever, ever throw your minutes out. They stay. That is the record of the history of your corporation, your nonprofit. The other things have various other requirements, and I know you won't remember them all, and that's not important because I'm going to give you the list. All right, budget basics. There are 2 ways to structure your budget: the line item and the categorical. And we use a combination of the 2. So when we bring the budget to the board, they see and approve the line item. So every single line is approved by them. We don't do a separate vote for everyone, but they can discuss and motion to change any one of them and adjust that. And what they've adopted is the line item budget. And that means that we can only pay an expense or receive money. Receiving is a little different, but we can only pay an expense up to the amount that's budgeted in that line, that specific line. So for insurance, looks like there's $600 in there. My eyes are not that great with this. If our bill comes in at $650, we're going to need to do a budget amendment. We cannot pay $650 out of a line that has $600 in it. Once the board has approved that, then they know that those monies are going to be paid out in those categories as laid out. But what we give to the membership to approve, we show them the line item so they see what makes up those categories, but they're approving each category. So the administrative expenses, they're approving the total. They're approving the total of the PTA meetings and communications and so forth. Why does that matter? That matters because if in the middle of the month we get a bill for $650 for our insurance, we know we have to pay it. We have to have it, right? But we don't want to go back, wait for the next board meeting, which could be a couple of months, to get that budget amendment approved. But we have extra money in our charitable registration that we didn't have to pay, or we have extra money in supplies. So we could take the $50 as a board for one line within that category and do a budget amendment to the line where we need it within that category without going back to the membership, because the total for that category is still the same. So that's the benefit of doing the categorical budget, getting that approved by your members rather than every line. Okay. Does that make sense? I hope, because that's really important and very helpful. When you're structuring your budget, because you have to do this charitable form at the end of the year, it's a good model to follow in terms of how you're grouping those categories together, because then you don't have to recalculate at the end of the year to figure out what number goes in this line, what number goes in this line. You already have it all together. So, or you can have your spreadsheet calculate that number from various categories. It's just a suggestion. It's not a requirement. Planning for the period, this comes up a lot. Why should this year's board do the budget for next year? Can't we just do a summer budget? Things like that. You probably heard a lot of that. If you only do a summer budget, meaning you only budget for the things you expect to pay through July 1st through maybe the end of September. September board meeting for most PTAs is the back to school night. So you're not actually getting to vote and discuss on anything. So it's going to be October before you have a meeting where you could do a budget amendment. And if any member doesn't come back, or you don't have a quorum or anything like that, you might not even be able to address it then. You're stuck with only that little bit of those 3 or 4 months worth of budgeting that you have. So you probably don't have your money, any money to do anything until you can get quorum and get a budget amendment. So our suggestion is highly, highly recommend budget. Whatever budget you pass is technically for a year anyway. So if you say you're doing a summer budget, that just means you're cutting yourself short. Budget for the whole year. Even if you don't know what is coming, what the next board's going to do, or what your expenses might be, do your best guess. Typically, I will take, if I'm using a spreadsheet, take whatever my current budget is with the amendments that we've made over the year, and just copy that over. And that's what I start with for my new budget for the new year. If there's some change, like I know that the insurance is going to go up, then yeah, I'm going to bump that line up. If I know that we've finished a project that we had budgeted last year, we don't need that anymore, I'm going to reduce that. But that's my starting point, where I am right now when I start to formulate that budget in April or May for the following year. It is not it's not ensuring that the next board has to do anything specific that you said, because they can amend it at any time. it's giving them the funding they need to start and to continue operations until they can determine what they need to amend and do that process. They can't be spent until you have a budget. So if you didn't approve a budget yet for next year, you can't spend any money over the summer. You won't be able to spend any money until October. Most places do back to school, staff, welcome backs or something in September. If you don't have a budget, you can't spend the money. So you need to pass the budget with your current board, even if it means you have to call an emergency meeting with your current board and members right now before the end of the month. It's going to be tough. But you need to have that budget done. Yeah. You want to look at your trends and predictions and your plans and all of that when you're considering that, but just start with where you're ending and move from and go from there. It's a good starting point. Same information, a little bit deeper dive on it. When you're estimating your revenues, you want to be as conservative as you can, underestimate them. So if you have been receiving, $2,000 a year in donations, and last year you suddenly got $5 because you connected with somebody new or new organizations, whatever, or had some very generous parents, whatever the case may be, you probably don't want to budget $5 for the next year. You want to go somewhere in the middle, maybe, or stay with the 2. If you get more, that's great, but you don't want to overestimate and overspend. Your expenses, on the flip side, would rather estimate higher rather than lower. If it's been $600 for a year, for 3 years, maybe there'll be an increase, maybe bump it to $650, something like that, unless you already know what the costs are going to be. Better to have budgeted too high in the expenses and not spend it than too low and have to go back and fix it. Better to underestimate your revenues and have extra money to do things than to overestimate them and run out of money because it didn't materialize. A word about carryover funds. Obviously, your budgets have to balance. Okay, your income has to match your expenses. What do you do with the money and notice that's on both these slides. So when you're looking at your revenues, it's not technically a revenue, but right under your revenue section, you're going to add in your cash on hand at the end of the year. So if you expect to have $1,500 left from this fiscal year to carry into next year in your bank account, then you've got to account for that somewhere because that's money you have available to spend. So you'll list it under your revenues, but in your total of money available, carryover funds. In your expenses, when you're trying to balance those, your income, your expected revenue may exceed your expected expenses. You're trying to build up a little bit of cushion that would be expected. So you're going to put that difference in your carryover funds listed under your expenses, but as money that will be, I say expended, it's really going to be carried over to the next year. So that's how you balance the budget with what's coming in because it was already in the account now. So you'll start the year with that. How do you account for that with your carryover funds in your revenue section, but not counted as revenue? And how you carry over how you account for what you're going to carry over to the following year is under your expense lines. And some of the things that you should consider when you're trying to figure out what you put in your budget. Always has to balance. If it doesn't, then you've got to adjust something. Your revenues or your expenses, they shouldn't be too far off. So those carryovers shouldn't be very much. Certainly not more than probably 20% of your budget at a maximum. Otherwise, you're holding money from current students and families for some unknown purpose in the future instead of using it for the current students. You don't want to spend every dime out of the account, but you don't want to carry large balances either, unless you have a designated line that's for some specific project like a new sign out front, but you're raising money separately for that and it's going directly to that line and it's only to be used for that. The adoption process, you notice this is circular. It's never ending. So you're going to formulate your budget. You're going to approve the budget, the board and the membership. You're going to start to execute your budget. Sorry, spending the money, bringing in the money, constantly watching it, reassessing it, oversight on it, and then amending as necessary. So you're back to the formulation. So this is ongoing, and amending it is not that difficult. It's a vote, but you need to be able to explain why you need to do that. And I wouldn't try to do it every month. I try to be as conservative as you can with that. Oops, we've got 6 minutes left. Cautionary expenditures. If you use a mini grant process or whatever process you have for people to request money from the PTA, it should pass through your principal. They should sign off that this is not a school expense that they're responsible for, that is already budgeted by the school, and that this personnel just didn't know when they're asking the PTA to buy it. You are not the school's slush fund. You are not there working at their direction. You're working collaboratively with them, but you are a separate entity in support of the school, but you're not funding the schools, right? They have a responsibility to provide education, and they should be doing that. All right. If you donate money, you should use one of the forms. I'll send you these as well from AIM Insurance that says things like, we're giving you this donation, and they have a specific line they're supposed to record it in, and that's on the form too. It is to be used for this purpose only by this date, otherwise you give the money back, right? It reverts back to us, so that you don't just give them money and they use it for something totally different. You're being very specific about it. They sign it, you sign it, everybody knows. If you're giving them an item, then you need to have a hold harmless, like you're buying them ceiling fans. In one case, we had this. PTA bought them. They were put up. I'm not sure who put them up. Years later, they're wobbly. The school's not maintained them because they say they're PTA property because they never took possession of it. If one of them falls, guess who they're going to look to? The PTA. So they don't use them. So they're roasting in the rooms, but with ceiling fans, but don't use them because no one clarified who owns that and is responsible for maintenance, upkeep, and liability on them. So use these forms. It's to protect you and to make sure that the schools are actually using the things that you're giving them. Okay. Approved budget only. We covered that. No cash, ever, 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 ever. Right? You don't write checks to cash. You don't write checks to petty cash. No counter checks. It has to be tracked. It requires 2 signatures, which means you can't do cash. And you're going to have like a change fund for your book fair or other events. The financial guidance is that you write a check to someone, they cash the check and put the money in, and every day that's money is deposited, and you do it again the next day. It's completely illogical to me, and I know it never happens, but that's the guidance that you're supposed to follow. That you're not taking out what you put in. Like if I go get $100 and change, and at the end of the day, I take my $100 out, count out the rest of the money, deposit that, keep that $100 back in there for change for the next day. That's not the way it's supposed to work. And that's all I'll say. Because I know it happens. Handling cash and cash equivalents. That's cash, checks, gift cards. Yes, you can use gift cards. You just have to track them with the number on them and a spreadsheet or a document that is exactly the way you would, like a check register, same way. You're going to track when it comes in, the amount, some identifying number or something on it, even if you have to write it on there. And when someone receives that, you give that to someone and for a drawing or whatever, they need to sign that they got it. You're protecting yourself so that you don't, no one can make the accusation that you got all these gift cards and used them yourself. You never gave them to anybody. You need proof that somebody received them as they were intended. Credit cards are allowed. There's guidance in the financial guide. Still 2 authorizations, things like that. We talked about that a little bit earlier. Same with electronic banking. You can remote deposit checks. Okay. You can take a picture of the check and remotely deposit. You should then shred that check. Do not keep someone's check with their banking information on it. Same with credit card information. Never keep that around. You should have at least two signatories on the bank account, your treasurer and your president. I recommend three, and that's the recommended guidance. Another board member. Then you also need one other board member to review the books monthly, as the president does and the treasurer does. When the treasurer does the reconciliation, president should review it and sign it. So every month, that is a requirement of our insurance. So if you have a loss, it gets covered. That extra person reviewing it helps to ensure that no two people can collude to do nefarious things. It's an extra set of eyes that are not signers on the accounts. Okay. Deposits and receipts, depositing the cash using the cash verification form, depositing checks and cash immediately, all of those good things. Never keep money anywhere but in your bank account. It should be deposited every day. Again, everything has to be authorized and funded, budgeted, and have the funds in the account. Yes, this is a big one. No two signers on the account can be related or live in the same household. So they may not be related by law, but they live in the same house. They cannot both be signers on the account. If they are related and live separately, they still can't be signers, both be signers on the account. They cannot be related or live in the same household and both be signers on the account. Yeah, track on all your receipts, making sure you have backup for everything. If somebody wants a reimbursement, doesn't have a receipt. Sorry, Charlie. And a picture of their bank account where it came out or their credit card where it's charged is not sufficient. Reconciling your accounts every month, having your president sign off on it, and whoever that extra reviewer is signing off on it. Again, those are requirements of your insurance to make sure you get coverage if you have a loss of any kind. You can use Excel. You can do it by hand as long as it's neat and people can follow it to review your books. You can use other software if you already have it, QuickBooks or any of those things, whatever works for you. But you can also check TechSoup to see if you can get discounted programs. Often you can. Yeah. That's all your information about the reporting for the treasurer's reports. All board members have a fiduciary responsibility to ensure that your PTA is maintaining proper financial controls. That is the big takeaway here. You are responsible for making sure that that happens. And we're not going to get into all of that. Okay, these are the slides about those contributions. We had the questions earlier, but I think I already covered it. If you give something a value, the value of that is not tax deductible. The rest of it is. And these are some particular examples that you can look at when you get those slides. A token amount of $11 and change you can give. So you give a free keychain or something like that when you join, or a mug. You get a school mug if you join in the months of September and October, something like that. You can do that. Keep in mind that you need to set your dues accordingly so you're not losing money, or that you have the financial standing to be able to lose that money to get the members. And this is a little chart to help you determine whether you have to send an acknowledgement. The best practice is to send an acknowledgement for it could be an email, it could be a letter, generally an email suffice, or a receipt with your name and the amount on it, what it was for, to make sure that every donation is acknowledged. If it's above $75, then you have to acknowledge it, that you need to give them something. Okay. Okay, we are at 8:33, and we did take a lot of questions.
Did.
Um, let's see if there's anything else that's critically important. This is about the financial review and then your insurance coverage. I think we pretty much cover the financial review information too. We just covered it in the wrong order. So, as I said, you will get the slides, and we will be happy to take any other questions that you have. After you get those, please email back and we'll answer those. Um, anyone who needs to leave or wants to leave is free to do so, but I'm happy to stay on and answer questions. I see that there's quite a few of them in the chat.
Yeah. So I'm going to try and scroll back, Laura, and
Oh, I'm sorry.
thank you very much. I think everybody's really appreciating it. And just to reiterate what was put in the chat, all this information will be shared. I know many of you are asking for copies, so I think Laura's planning to share all that out. When you registered, your emails were captured, and so things will be
Yes.
shared. So the first question, and try and get through this quick, is related to back to the transition, and then the rest of them are more related to budget. So I wanted to go back to that one. So who should initiate the transition meeting? And if available and wanting, should the other current executive board members be a part of at least one transition meeting with the outgoing treasurer for awareness and transparency, since the books and activities is a collective responsibility?
Not a bad idea. Yeah. Be careful about reaching quorum, but definitely having others there. And president should always be aware. Again, that's back to that delegate but don't abdicate, right? You are still responsible for whatever happens with the treasurer, or whether they're keeping good records or not, or other activities happen. You're responsible. You're part of the board. It's not just on them. If you're not signing those reconciliations monthly or demanding that you have them, making sure that you look at the bank account. If you have online banking and they give you a printed copy that they printed online, have them bring up the account so you can see that what that bank statement says, the paper they gave you, matches what the screen says. Or that you use your own log on, view only credentials to look at the bank account and make sure, because bank statements can be faked. And many of nefarious situations have come about because someone was removing checks, changing balances, doing things, and making a bank statement that looked very real. But you have to verify it. You have that duty. So, same thing in the transition, making sure that you're checking those records and making sure that everything is balanced out. And hopefully, the treasurer has done at least a reconciliation up until the end of May. But hopefully, like the financial review, if they've done that up till May, then adding June in is no big issue, so that you can ensure that you're getting um, books that you understand. If you don't understand their method, having someone else there may help you get that perspective, because they understand what they were getting from the treasurer throughout the year, hopefully. So they can say, oh, well, this means this and that means that, and you can get some clarity that you may not get if you're just not connecting with their train of thought and how they kept the books. Might make it more challenging for you. So always good to have extra eyes and ears.
Thank you, Laura. And then it said, you mentioned starting with a new budget. What happens to unspent money in the past fiscal year? Does that go into reserves?
No, that's the carryover funds that I talked about. So that's going to be like your cash on hand is what it is, because that's what you started with before you brought in any money, before you spend any money. You started with whatever that bank balance is, the reconciled bank balance at the end of the year. So accounting for outstanding checks and deposits, you're going to have, that's going to be your startup fund for the year. So you'll have your revenue section, and then you'll say total budgeted revenue, and then you'll have carryover funds from whatever the previous year is. So in this case, 2025, FY 2025. And then that will be added, and it will show your cash available. So what you expect to come in, what you have on hand right now, total cash available for you to budget to expend. I'll send you an example of that too.
Okay. And then this was a question, I think, when you were talking about checks. So it says checks don't have to be cashed. So checks don't have to be cash to be considered cash basis.
Right. They just have to be paid. When you write it, you have obligated to pay it. It is a cash equivalent that is running around in the mail system or wherever it is. Um, so you have recorded in your books when you write the check, and it's considered paid.
Okay. And then there was a question, and I'm trying to find it now, but there was a new PTA starting up at elementary school, and they had a question about paying dues and insurance.
Hmm.
And let me see if I can.
Had it,
Oh, well, here it is. What if we are a brand new organization? Um, so yeah, they're starting their PTA at Sergeant Shriver Elementary School.
yes, I'm aware.
Yeah. So I think this was when you were talking about the increase in dues and all that, but they'll probably have to pay after.
Okay, they didn't have any members for last year, for this year,
Okay.
so they don't. Well, reach out to email me. I just put my email in the chat. I'm
Okay.
using my email just in case we're still ongoing after I turn over to Artie in a few days. 7 days.
Oh,
Get ready.
I know.
But yes, yeah, so
I know
email
where to
me.
find you, so I'm not as scared. Otherwise,
Yeah,
I would be.
no, and I'm not running anywhere. But with new startups, it's a little more complicated, especially Free State had your funds, so they may have already deducted the dues from that. We'll need to check on that. That's why I'm saying email me so we can check it out. If I don't want to give you the wrong answer,
Sounds
but
good.
we
And
do want to
then
make sure that those are paid.
thank you. And Chantel, I think you had this question, and I'm not sure. So you said, so we have a MCCPTA dues for our delegates. So I'm not sure what you meant by delegates because the PTAs are required to pay MCC PTA dues as well for each of their members.
For
But
every member, $1 for every member. So if you have 50 members and you've paid us 25, you need to pay another 25. And you have to have paid 10, it was 25 previously, in order to be able to vote at MCC PTA. So doing this training, having your information in the blue book, which I forgot to put in the chat or to mention earlier, make sure that it'll be in the bottom of my email when you get it. Make sure that you sign up for the blue book, or maybe I can drop it in here in a minute.
yeah, I mean, there's still 40 people on, so
Yeah, yeah. We have to have your information for your members. All of your um, board members need to register. We also highly, highly, highly recommend that your delegates and committee chairs and all that also, oops, I don't know where that bylaws thing came from, but um, the link is there to sign up in the blue book. So we know how to contact you. We can keep you posted about what's happening with PTA when we're doing with MCC PTA, when we're doing their advocacy priorities, when we're having our summer area meetings to develop those advocacy priorities. We can't tell you if we don't know how to reach you. So it's important that you put that information in there, and it's required.
yeah. And even if you're a returning board member, you still need to fill out the blue book.
Yes, because it's cleared out. It gets you on our listservs. They're cleared out each year, and then you're added back if you're returning. It's not done immediately because we know that sometimes there's a lag, but you want to make sure that you're getting the most up to date information about like National PTA Convention, which is happening this week, or dues increases or proposals, things like that. You want to make sure you're aware.
Yes. And then another question is related to the statements of work and what the requirement for that is.
I'm sorry.
Doing statements of work, like, or a plan
Yeah,
of
the plan
work.
of work. Yeah. So we have that at MCC PTA. Not all PTAs do. If you do, it would have to be in standing rules or by a board vote agreement to do that. It is a good idea because it can capture the plans of every committee of what they plan to do and make sure that the board is aware and has approved. They're not going off the rails and having, political ice cream sundae thing events or things like that. Um, because you know the rules now, right? You have access to more information anytime you need it. They may not realize that there are rules, particularly if they're new, about doing certain things. So that plan of work makes sure that everybody's on the same page and knows what all the others do, helps with that, delegate without, but not abdicate, right? Because they gave you a plan of work and said what they were going to do. It's also a great place for them to put in what they need in terms of budget. So if they put that in requests for on their plan of work, you can budget accordingly. In MCCPTA, we put money in the budget in certain lines for our committees, but they can't spend it until we have a plan of work and the board has approved it. So.
Okay, and then let's see. Earlier you were talking about authorized authorizations, and so just repeating what authorized means. I think
Yeah,
was the
meaning that,
first.
like, if you're planning to have a back to school picnic, okay, and someone needs to go and get sodas and food or hot dogs or whatever from Costco or Sam's or something, and they're going to use the PTA debit card to do it. Okay, that avoids the inequity of expecting someone to um, put money out of their own pocket and wait to be reimbursed. Not everyone can do that, especially for a larger uh, event. Then they can use the card, but you're going to need some form that is signed by another signer, someone else authorized. You're going to need, even if it's email back and forth, where they're uh, authorizing you to use the card to buy these items. It doesn't need to be the specific amount, but authorization to use the card for that purpose for those items. That's what we mean by two authorizations. Because if you were writing them a check, you would have a check request or reimbursement request or whatever the case, or disbursement request, and you would have spelled out what you were buying and why. And then you would have signed it, and the president or another officer would have signed it, and the treasurer would have received it and written you a check. And then two people would have signed that check. So now you have those authorizations. If you're not doing a check, you still need that authorization. Maybe you use the disbursement form to do that. You email that to someone, they write back, yes, it's approved, or they sign it electronically with Adobe or whatever, or they sign it and scan it physically and scan it back in. But you need to have the authorizations. You still have to have two people authorize that expenditure with a credit card or a debit card, or e-check, however you're paying it, that is not a check, to make sure you're covered. And they don't then say, we didn't authorize that, we're not paying you back, or you misused the credit card. Um, and it gives the treasurer the documentation that they need when the credit card bill comes to be able to pay it.
Right. Got it. And then earlier you were giving the example with like the $600 bill, I think was related to the insurance. And was that related to knowing that's an expense that's expected? So you want to make sure that's appropriately budgeted for.
Yes, yeah. And I was using that as an example because it was on the line and it was one of the few that I could see. It was really
Got it.
small.
I know it's tiny.
Yeah, so then you can blow it up as big as you want when you have it in front of you when you get the slides. But yes, it's just knowing, like, you may have already gotten a notice that the insurance rates are going to go up. We don't pay $600 for insurance. It's like 286, I think it is, last I checked. But if they were going to raise the rates, they would notify you earlier in the year, and then they bill you in May. So if you have budgeted this year $200 and you get the bill and it's 286, you're going to have to do a budget amendment. But now when you're developing the next year's budget, you already know it's 286. So you're not going to budget 200 again. You're going to budget the appropriate amount, maybe a little bit extra.
Right. And then the other question, I think this is a timing question. So it was around fundraising in the summer before the new budget is approved. But usually the new budget is approved at the last PTA meeting of the year, which is before the summer. And then books are frozen during July until you have your financial review. Is that
Right.
accurate?
Yes, if you have your financial review committee set up and ready to go, you're in great shape. You do your pencil copy when you get your bank statement the first few days of July. You make sure everything is balanced. You give it to them. They review it. You have your books back in a week or two. So by mid-July, you can start, doing financial transactions again. You're always going to deposit money anyway. If you get money in, deposit it. Don't hold it and wait for that. But you can't spend money. I would not spend anything until that review is done. You can't spend anything until the budget is approved. That's the importance of approving a budget before the end of the year, before the following fiscal year, so that you have that authorization from your members to spend money on those activities. You can amend it later if you need to, if it doesn't align with the priorities of the new board or something else, more exciting comes along or more profitable or whatever the thing is. That can be changed, but you have a starting point. You have funds to operate over the summer and then the back to school period.
Great. And then these are the questions about what PTAs can pay for. So kind of going back to the cautionary use of funds and all of that. So can PTA pay for classroom specific apps, for example, Kahoot or Quizlet?
If it is benefiting a significant portion of the group that you're trusted with. So a classroom, yes, that's not an insignificant number, right? Would I rather say pay for it for the grade? Yes, because a lot of those subscriptions you should look at, like, how many does that cover? Does that cover 50? But if I include two, all the classes for that grade level, they can use it collaboratively. And, it's only $20 more to get enough for, 500 kids to use it or whatever it is.
Okay. And then I think this is the last question. So if anybody's on and we didn't answer your question, we missed it in the chat, just please repost it or come off mute. But the last question is, we're saving money for a new sign. I think you said we need to have a line item for that, not just an increasing balance that isn't obligated. Is that correct?
That is my recommendation. It is highly recommended. Oftentimes you're doing fundraisers specifically for that, or you're asking for donations specifically for that. If you ask someone to make a donation to the PTA, that can go in your general fund. You can put that in donation line, period. If you ask for people to make donations to help buy a sign for in front of the school, that's called a directed donation, meaning they gave you money for this purpose, and that's the only purpose you can use that money for. If something happens and you're not allowed to get the sign, or you're not able to get the sign, or whatever, you have two choices. You either have to return the money to the donor or offer to, or you have to ask for their permission to use it in another way. And I would suggest a written permission, an email or something like that. If you ask for money to do a specific thing, that's what you have to use the money for. So in doing that, I highly recommend having a separate budget line where you are tracking how much money comes in for that purpose, so that you don't run afoul of using designated donations for other purposes. And you'll know when you reach your goal. Because if you haven't reached that goal in a couple of years and then you age out and you go to a different school, whatever, someone else says, oh, we just have this money here. I don't know. Sign? What sign? I don't know anything about it. That information doesn't always get transferred. If you have a specific line in your budget, savings for, or you could do a savings account even, fundraising for this sign, then you're going to have that designated and you're going to show that balance.
So, and then one more question with respect to compliance. If we are one of the unfortunate PTAs who fell out of compliance, any recommendations on how to navigate asking for donations when we aren't technically a 501c3 yet?
Don't say that they're tax deductible donations. That you can still ask for money. You can then take donations. they may end up being taxable. I would I would be cautious about that, but you may have to in order to get the money to get restarted, right? Um, Memberships and things like that, we can set aside, we can work with Free State where they're holding your funds in um, a separate account and an escrow that allows you to do the things that you need to do to become compliant. Then when you are, they'll pay from those funds, they will pay for the restart fees, whatever it costs with IRS and whatnot, and then return the rest to you. So because you're operating under them and it's the money going into their accounts, you can get donors, memberships, things like that, and put that in there.
All right. I think we actually got to all of our questions.
Sorry, I had a
Oh,
question.
go ahead, Jasmine.
I'm so sorry if you answered this,
No.
but when are the 990s due? Is it April 15th or is it June 30th because that's the end of our fiscal year?
No, the 990s, you can't do it until after you've closed your year and everything is like your financial review is done.
Okay.
It's a number of days after the end of your fiscal year, and I believe it works out to be October 1st.
Oh, okay.
It's
So
been
we
a while
haven't
since I had to do one.
missed it yet.
No,
Like,
And
you
then
haven't.
and then you
Okay,
have to
good.
submit that to Free State by October 31st.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you so much.
But that is also in the treasurer's checklist that's in the Free State financial guide that I will send to you. It's also on their website under resources. And that checklist is extremely helpful because you can check off month by month that you've done all the things that you need to do. You can even put them in your calendar.
Yeah, and I recommend, having, yeah, exactly, that checklist with you because that's really helpful. And then I think, Laura will be sharing the checklist as part
Yes.
of the information that goes out
Yeah.
following this call. And Laura, I'm trying to recall like earlier, because I know on the last call that we had last week, you went through in detail with the kind of the Delaware, the umbrella organization, all of that. So there are a few questions coming in around how long it takes to be 501(c)(3) and people needing to do that. And so
Yes. So I think I mentioned earlier that when Maryland PTA imploded, that was our statewide organization, we were under their group exemption. And this part I didn't get into. When they started to get into trouble, they were not following the rules. There's a lot of things going on there, whole lot of things. One by one, as they lost in court, as they were fighting National PTA, trying to shut them down because they were not following the rules, they quit. They resigned. This one, that one, the other one, and there was one person left. Unfortunately, she is not an honest person, had pending charges in many places for many nefarious things, pretty horrific things. But she ended up the de facto president of Maryland PTA and refused to shut down. They had to get court orders to wrestle the website and the name and the use of the PTA name and brand away from her. But she still continued for at least a year, maybe two after that, to try to entice PTAs that didn't know the history and know what was going on to send their membership dues to her. So a lot of places got ripped off from that. But when she finally got the court order to stop using the PTA name, stop using the PTA website, things like that, she sent a letter to the IRS and to the state of Maryland and used some financial information gained from checks that have been used to pay dues previously to charge many of our PTA's accounts to dissolve our corporations in Maryland. We quickly caught onto that because we saw these fees coming out of our accounts. Said, what the heck? And they stopped it. Maryland stopped it and reversed it. So we didn't have the consequence there. However, she also sent a letter to IRS saying all of these PTAs that were under our group exemption are non-compliant and are no longer 501c3s. They should be revoked because they are not compliant. And the IRS set about doing that. It's funny how slow they can be with some things and how quickly they acted on that one. So they got through part of the list. They didn't get everybody, and her list did not include everybody. It was mostly PTAs she'd had some kind of issue with. Some were removed from the group exemption, some were not. But because Maryland PTA folded and they owned the group exemption, we basically all lost that group exemption. At the same time, Free State IRS was changing their group exemption rules, revising those, and the practice maybe even doing away with it. We're hearing now. I don't know what's going to happen with that. So no one could get a new group exemption until they finished those revisions. They still haven't. That was 2020, 2021, 2022. They still haven't finished the revisions. So we had to go under Delaware's PTA. They agreed to adopt us or foster us, I guess, until Free State PTA could get their group exemption and put all of the Maryland PTAs back under their umbrella. So right now we should be under Delaware's PTA group exemption. I was told on the call the other day that on the training that the IRS is even rejecting those now, new additions to existing groups. So I don't know what's going to happen with that. I need to touch base with with National PTA. I know they're fighting it. They've worked with our elected officials. They've worked with so many people trying to get this straightened out because it has been a real challenge for us. Hopefully that will be resolved soon. The only other option is for each individual PTA to get their own nonprofit status, which is more onerous because you have more reporting requirements and more money to get it. And it's not impossible and it's not excruciating, but it is more challenging because we're generally not accountants. Even as treasurers, we don't generally get an accountant who is comfortable working with IRS forms and all of those procedures and things that will be necessary every year going forward if you do that. So it's a cautionary tale there. I know the incoming treasurer has done that with, excuse me, with PTA that she was treasurer for and is very comfortable with that. But again, we're all volunteers and we have term limits and we have children that are constantly aging out. So you have to make the decision about whether that's best for your PTA or to continue as we are with the group exemption. So that's my spiel about that.
Yep.
How long does it take to get a 501c3? If you're starting up new, excuse me, I have to drink. Sorry. If you're starting new and you're with a brand new name, new everything, and you're just incorporating, you can do it very quickly. Excuse me. If you do it within 30 days of incorporating, then you can also do the nonprofit status. It doesn't say that it's temporary, but it's contingent till on review. Rarely see any rejected. But if you have lost your 501c3 status, you can get it back. There is a process to do that, and we can help you with that. So, Gladys, what PTA are you with?
Gladys, are you still there? I know you're on mute.
Hello, yes, I'm still here.
What
So
PTA
we're
are
a
you
part of the Sergeant Shriver Terrapins
Okay.
PTA, and they used to have a PTA, but we are not affiliated with them, so we're just starting off brand new and everything.
Yes, well aware of that story, that situation. So, okay, so you're starting brand new. It shouldn't take you very long. That said, the IRS staff positions, they were already understaffed and their staffing positions have been cut like most other federal agencies. So I wouldn't venture to say how long before it's finalized. But if you applied for that within the 30 days of incorporating, you should be able to start operating as a 501c3 unless and until they tell you you can't. I can reach out to Free State and make sure that it was done in that fashion and find out where they stand.
Yes. Okay. I would really appreciate that. Thank you so
But
much.
yeah, it'd be really hard for me to, and wrong of me to try to guess a timeline in the current conditions, unfortunately.
And Laura, when you send out the information to is one of the links to the cash encounters, I think from the guidance on Free State.
Yes.
Yeah. Because that has a lot of wealth of information too.
Yeah, it's on Free State, fspta.org on the resource page. It's the financial guide. I can try to go find it, but I just pasted it in here.
Yeah, let me see if
I can't minimize because I'm
Okay.
recording. So
Yeah, no. Let me see if I can find it. So does anybody else have any other questions? And just want to thank Laura. Everybody has said how amazing this presentation is, and it was very informative and comprehensive, and one of the most compelling presentations on board stuff. So thank you for sharing your
Great, thank you, Laura. I
experience
just
and
have one
expertise.
question. Can I still ask one question?
Yes, go
Sure.
ahead,
Yeah,
Priscilla.
sure.
Oh, great, thank you. And I agree. This is like been an amazing presentation. I really appreciate you. And I'm a new PTA president, and I definitely could not be going into this endeavor without your training session. So I really appreciate you. My question has to do with the 1-to-3 ratio. I'm
Mhm.
just not understanding exactly how to, I guess, like put that into practice.
So what you can't do is have, a dance as a fundraiser, not a program, but as a fundraiser in September, and a book fair in October, and something else in November. Like having fundraisers week after week or month after month, and then you do one play, maybe Nutcracker or something, at the holidays or before winter break, and say we're serving the children, right? No,
Mhm.
you're raising money. Most of your
I
function is raising money. Your work needs to be in providing resources and supports for the students, whether that's having a community gathering at no cost, whether it's having a play or buying books or whatever the case is, that you're providing more benefit than you're raising funds.
see. Okay, so it should be like 3 programs to
Mhm.
one fundraising.
Right.
I see. And then when we were talking about it before, you did mention it could also be a 2-to-1. So there's like a sliding scale there. Am
Well,
I
yeah,
misunderstanding?
you're breaking up a little bit, but
When
I think what
you
you're saying is when
mentioned
it's,
about 2 to 1, 2-to-1, and 3-to-1, or
yeah,
was that
so
about something else?
now the actual regulation does not say 3-to-1, right? The actual rule says
I'm
it's
sorry,
about,
I'm driving.
that's okay. It's about a
Sorry.
majority of your
I was
activities.
asking if there's like a sliding scale, because at some point you mentioned 2-to-1.
No, it's not a sliding scale.
Gotcha.
It is,
Okay.
the requirement
Oh,
is, like it can't be more than 50%. It's a little higher than 2-to-1, but not quite 3-to-1. So we say 3-to-1 to be safe.
okay. Gotcha. I understand now.
Right.
Great. Sorry about that. Thank
Right.
you.
If you did 2 programming activities to every 1 fundraiser, you would fall short of meeting the restriction. But at 3, you exceed it, so you're good. It's hard to
Gotcha.
do half of a program.
Right. Yeah. Better safe than sorry, too.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, thank you, Laura.
Okay, you're welcome. All right,
I think that's it.
I think so.
So I did put in the chat the link to the financial guide from Free State PTA, which has some of the forms that Laura talked about and also other information.
Thank you, Artie.
You're welcome. And don't be, I guess, scared by the 103 pages that it is.
A lot of it is forms and samples.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and examples and things like that. It's not all that dense information.
And it's nicely indexed, so you don't have to read the whole thing.
Yeah. One day I'll go back and do what I did with the previous version, which was linked the bookmarked all the sections and linked it to the table of contents. So you could just click on that and go right to where you needed to go. And link all the pieces in the treasurer's checklists too. So you click right
Yeah.
to the form and information, more information about it. All right. Well, we went well over. I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you, everyone, and good night.